We have to let them in.
It
Best
says
way to
you are
start.
live.
Best way to start the year. Best way to start the year. I know we have Ivan Paradeda. Um, he was excited about this that we're doing today. So
Good.
I know we're just gonna let people start coming in. We are just making sure that everything works this morning
That's right.
because we want to make sure that we get the new stuff to you, which is important.
Yeah, we
And
added a kind of a new feature with this running video on this one and
mhm,
presented a little bit of a challenge, but we think we got it figured out now.
we think we do.
Yeah.
But we may want to go and switch the PowerPoint slide so it's not too many of us.
Okay. So let me stop sharing for the moment.
Yeah. And we
And
could go into the PowerPoint view
yeah.
when you're ready to share because I
Yep.
think we have like William coming in, Kelly coming in. Um, of course, we have Greg Christensen, you know, just being available all the time, and Tychell, of course, all of them looking forward to it. So I think we're just getting people to start coming in very slowly,
And
and the best way to start the year.
yeah. And LinkedIn and YouTube seem to be working. Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I see something going on over there. Yeah.
definitely. Because I think people are excited about this because there are a lot of things that we can do
Yeah.
and so many um, changes that we can make in this new year that can actually help add more value because that's what it's about at the end of the day. Making sure that we add value to everybody who's listening, people who are, trying to get their programs to work because when you start off the year, the first thing everybody talks about is the budget.
Yeah.
And you know what's the first thing to go? Anything related to condition monitoring. That's the part that they take off and they don't realize how much of an impact condition monitoring has on your
Yeah.
equipment or how much it can help you, which like just saving your equipment really. So be that advocate for condition monitoring because we need to be able to protect our assets and make sure that those add some value because if our assets go down, eventually we sort of go down as well. And it's never fun when that happens because, there's everything going on with supply, maintenance, planning, scheduling, trying to get people to get the parts involved or get, more equipment or more labor. So those are the things that we have to think about when we're thinking about cutting our budget. Like, what are we willing to sacrifice? Because nobody wants that unplanned downtime. So that is something that we need to definitely think about when we, say we're going to have some cuts. But, you know, we will be talking about that in a bit
and
and how we can avoid some of those things.
yeah, and I think, you start out the new year and people are looking to, as they say, turn over a new leaf
Yeah.
or make some changes, not only in their work life and career success, but also on the personal side. So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
try to tie into that energy, right? And say, what can we do different around
Yes.
grease and grease analysis, grease lubricated equipment, just by turning over that new leaf, starting the year out
Mm-hmm.
strong. And I think that's a great way to get things kicked off.
Oh, yeah, always, always is because that's at the heart of it, making sure that you actually add some value. And, turning over a new leaf is great, but make sure you turn over a new leaf with value,
Right.
not just non value.
Yeah, no one says, well, this year I'm going to gain weight, or
Yeah.
this year I'm going to be lazier, or
Mm-hmm.
this year I'm going to get more cluttered in my
Oh
house.
my God.
It's
Yeah.
always in the positive direction, and that's
Mm-hmm.
certainly what we want to do here.
Definitely. Definitely what we want to do. So I think we have some people that have joined us already.
Okay.
So I guess we could start because
Hmm.
I know we had a little bit of a late start this morning, but This afternoon for me.
Yeah. Or wherever you are, whatever it is,
Wherever,
right?
any part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, since we're going to have to kind of do a share screen here, I'm going to
Yes. Oh, that's
set this up.
perfect.
That looks good.
That looks good.
Okay. All right. So again, starting off the year, Grease Thief goes live, and this time
Bye.
it's what's new in the world of grease
Mm-hmm.
sampling and analysis, and how can we set our own resolutions to do things differently going forward to help our grease lubricated equipment. So yeah, I want to talk about a greasing new year,
Yep.
and some of these things that we want to do. Like some people say, I just wasted time last year. I want to
Mm-hmm.
stop wasting time. And so we want to stop wasting time spent greasing, and we want to
Yes.
stop wasting grease, because as we've talked before, a lot of times if we're not looking carefully, if we're not looking closely, if we're not measuring, we don't have the parameters to change, then our default state is often a waste of time
It
and a
is.
waste of grease. And you talk about getting things out of your life that don't work
Mm-hmm.
for you anymore.
Yep.
Well, let's get rid of the grease that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work for you, that might even be working against you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Incompatible.
Yeah, incompatible. You can grease machines to failure, right?
Yeah.
Get that great case of the electric motor that someone
Yes.
says, "Hey, I'm just gonna grease that bugger and until it comes
Yeah.
out somewhere," and the next thing you got a motor failure.
Yep.
So let's get rid of the grease and the
Mm-hmm.
greasing practices that don't work for you but that work against you.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
And then cleanup is always a good time to do
Yes.
cleanup, right? You get through Christmas and
Mm-hmm.
Boxing Day, and then you say, okay, I got this new stuff. Let's get rid of the old stuff. Let's clean out,
Yep.
whether it's the garage or this room or what have you. So we want to commit to clean grease.
Yep.
And you don't know where to clean if you haven't looked.
Yeah.
That's certainly the case with grease. It's not an obvious thing. So we'll
Yeah.
talk about that. And I know for me, when I started out a clean slate, a new year, when
Mm-hmm.
I was going to school, I'd say, well, I'm going to get a good report card this time.
Yep.
Maybe I got
Sure.
behind on my assignments, and maybe I didn't put the effort forward that I needed to, but going forward now, I'm going to have a good report card. So, what is that? What is that report card for greasing? It's the testing, right?
Uh,
It's the test card that comes back and says, this is how everything looks. This is how the wear
mm-hmm.
looks. This is the consistency of a grease. This is clean or dirty. This is oxidized or mixed or whatever. So we can resolve to say, let's go get a good report card, because if we
Yep.
do the right things and we react to data from the past, it'll get better, and that'll be
Yeah.
reflected in our analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we get into the new year and it's like, you know what, this year I'm going to make some travel plans. I'm going to
Yep.
go places I haven't been before. That's certainly the case for me, Sonia.
Nice.
I spent most of my early life kind of rooted in the US and
Mm-hmm.
had done much traveling. I visited our friends in Canada a little bit.
Yeah.
And then finally I made a trip to Europe, and since
Mm-hmm.
that time I've been going there fairly regularly, but I'm going to be heading to a new part of the
Yes.
world that I've never been to before.
Good.
Where's that?
Excited for that one. I'm
Yeah.
going to Dubai.
Yeah, going to Dubai. A lot of people say, hey, if you want to go to that part of the world,
Mhm.
that is the place
That
to
is the
go.
place to go, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I'm going to talk about, our plans in Dubai and
Mhm.
where the grease thief is headed next, because, that's another thing. If you listen to our series here and you say, I want to do something about this, yeah, you can tune in. These workshops are helpful, and
Mhm.
you can read things that are being written and so forth. But sometimes there's no substitute for getting
Listen.
shoulder to shoulder, right? And really meeting and then seeing the equipment,
Mhm.
seeing how it's used. So we're going to talk about a number of opportunities where I'm headed with this technology.
Yes.
Into people's backyards, maybe, and I want to make the most of that. I want to meet up with as many people as we can.
Mhm.
I want them to come knowing what the questions they have, and and really benefit from seeing it in person and touching it and
Oh
using it
yeah.
so that they're ready to unleash this technology in the new year.
Definitely. And I think it's such an exciting time because there are so many opportunities going around, especially for this year. So, stay tuned
Yeah.
because you don't know where the grease thief is going to pop up.
But I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a few hints
Ah, oh,
where we're
yeah.
headed over the next several months.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. But let's just say for this coming year, let's start by
Yep,
agreeing to stop wasting time, right?
sure.
Why are like when you go out every day, you ask your question, why am I greasing that equipment today? Does it really need it? And what went into the decision that got me to that point? When you
Yep.
stare down and you got a grease gun in your hand and you've got a work order in the other, how did we get to this point? Is it been the same for the last 15 years because that's what we've always done? Is it somebody at some day decided that this is what we should do? Was there a failure sometime in the past? And they were like, I don't know what we should do, but let's grease more often so we can show we're trying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you might question that. Does it really need it? Has greasing become a habit? Are we
Right.
are we doing it just because? And it's so easy to fall into that trap, that
Mm-hmm.
recurring trap, when it's not really justified by the circumstances, right? And so how would you tell if greasing has become a habit? Well,
Right.
do we take any feedback? Do we just say task done
Yeah.
and reset the clock for another, whatever it is, 1 month, 3 months, whatever it happens to be? Or do we actually respond to what happens at the event and use that to question whether it's the right interval? Or do we just say pump till it dumps, right? Just get out there and just
Yeah.
start greasing it, right? Until we see it dump out of the machine
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. Because we've talked about when we finally get around to, and we've got all these case studies, when people finally say, this is an important enough situation that we want to do some grease analysis.
Yeah.
We want to look at the data and we want to use that to adjust. We find that when that happens, the majority of the time, somewhere around half of the grease being used
Yes.
in machinery is being wasted, right? When we make an adjustment and that adjustment is validated, things like, the Chinook helicopter example,
Right.
where that's been cut in half. And
Mm-hmm.
the result of that is these are more reliable
Mm-hmm.
and safer and getting longer life and so forth. When they've done that in the auto industry for
Yeah.
robots, and they find that the robots are lasting longer by actually
Mm-hmm.
greasing less and so on. It's about half of the grease and about half of the time spent greasing is wasted. And so
Yes.
let's resolve to do that, because the tools are here to optimize. That's the sampling tools. So we know we get a good sample, and then the analysis that we do to that. So, our time and resources are precious, like we talked about in the
Mhm.
past. So in this new year, we should resolve to be better stewards of our limited time. If
Yes.
we do that,
We can try. We
yeah.
definitely should try.
So ways to stop waste. So spot check your machinery. Let's say, okay, I don't know where I am. I might
Mm,
have just blindly stumbled into a pretty good program.
right.
Everything seems to be all right. Reliability is acceptable. And, you know, no one's complaining that I'm spending too much time greasing. But what if we spot check? What if we say, okay, there's some critical components. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
take some samples. I'm going to use that data. And the best thing to do is to take what our current frequency of task is. And when we get to the end of that period, when we would be replenishing the grease, pull the sample then.
Yeah.
And it often works out well, because sometimes the best way to get a sample is when you add the new grease, the old grease is being
Yes.
expelled, right? So we capture that and use that to spot check. So, and then where do I spot check? Sample where your resource usage is the greatest. Now, what do we mean there? Where I've used the most grease? Possibly. What
Mhm.
about where most of my time is
Yeah.
spent trying to grease something? Or maybe where do I spend most of the time trying to repair grease
That's,
lubricated equipment, right? Because maybe that time that I'm spending is actually a consequence of not being optimized. So
mhm.
target those areas to do the spot checking. And then once you have that, let's review the data and then adjust and use that data to drive optimization based on data, right? I threw a chart up here that was from that Chinook study, and we made it as a Pareto chart.
Yes.
What's the rule of thumb for Pareto?
80%.
80/20, right? So
80/20.
88% of the issues are lying with 20% of
Yep.
the causes, right? And then so
Mhm.
we put this out in a Pareto chart, and we look at, in this case, the historical greasing intervals. We see that overwhelmingly, more than 80% here. You can see my
Yeah.
cumulative chart. More than 80% was there was more than half of the life left
Wow.
in the grease when it was being replenished. And so there's a huge opportunity there.
Mhm.
More than 80% of all samples had more than half of the life remaining in the grease. And so that's money just
Yeah.
lying there in the plant waiting to be just someone put it in a bag and hand it over because otherwise it's being burned, right?
Yes.
It's being burned. And so but it's data. And if you can
Mhm.
compile this data just by starting that process and then once you do that, once you start to make those changes, and I think you alluded to this, it's like if we share the savings, if we know and other
Yeah.
people that we work with know that we just did this pilot project,
Yep.
just did this spot check, and here's how much we're going to save when we change it, you know, people are looking to make money, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
if we saved it there, where do we go next?
Yep.
And now you're
Looking
not
for the opportunities.
yeah, you're not fighting to find that opportunity for implementation, but people are
Mhm.
coming to you and saying, "Hey, can we try it over here? Can
Yeah.
we try it over there?"
Yep. And that helps so much because we started off talking about the budget and the fact that we always have so many budget cuts. Like you wouldn't need to have a budget cut if you're saving them money.
That's right.
Like that's how it works. Try and save the money so you don't have to, go into that part of it.
Yeah, like the budget cuts are often like where are we having sunk
Yes.
costs, right? Can we
Mm-hmm.
can we still get the output we need without all these extra costs? But what we're talking about is let's reduce the costs by
Yes.
getting this piece right. And so and you're seeing that more and more, right? There's more of
Mm-hmm.
this, let's use the data, right? What's the biggest kind of buzzword out there in almost
Oh
any
boy.
industry right now? It's AI.
AI.
AI. Yeah, you know. And in the U.S., we just went through the whole thing of you know political change and whatnot. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that in those discussions too.
Yeah.
How is AI going to change that? How are we going to power AI?
Right.
I mean, when they're talking about not just how we're using it, but how are we ever going to have enough electricity to do this thing?
Yes. The
It's for real
support.
and it's coming. And so now you're going to see this change. People are going to look
Mm-hmm.
for the data, show me the data, and this is feeding right into it. So, AI can do amazing things, but it absolutely depends on having valid data input.
Always, you need that data. Like you can't make proper decisions without that. So that's your basis. If you
Yeah,
have if you have bad data, you make a bad decision.
that's right. You make it, or AI makes it for you, or
Yeah.
what have you. So this is where we need to be tightening up
Mm-hmm.
our data inputs because we're going to get asked for it. We're going to be
Yep.
like, hey, give me the data that we can churn. Now that we got this capability, let's AI churn it or machine learning or whatever, buzzword word you want to use. But ultimately, that data is going to be critical to making
Very
those
much.
decisions. And there's a whole area around grease analysis. That data has not been out there historically. There's
Mm-hmm.
little pockets, it's being used. There's little areas, there's case studies,
Yeah,
but we're going to have to start expanding this out if we're going to be able to make those good decisions going forward.
definitely.
Yeah, so get rid of that waste, save
Mm-hmm.
that effort, but also let's get rid of grease that
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
work for us, you know. And my wife says, I must have heard this somewhere. She goes, if she finds something, she says, "Does this spark joy? Right? Do I
Ah,
really need to keep this thing, or is it just taking up space?" And that's if she gets down to it, she goes, "Does this spark joy for me?"
mm.
You know?
I'm gonna have to use that.
Yeah, right. And sometimes it's the silliest things that just, make you smile or you
Hmm.
like looking at them, and then they get that shelf space, or
They
that's
do.
that's worth dusting every once in a while
Yep,
to keep it
for
around,
sure.
right?
For
But
sure.
once we figure those things out, then everything else is clutter.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And you'll be
There's
surprised the
Mhm.
amount of clutter that we have.
But there's even people that you can hire, professionals,
Oh,
to
yes.
declutter your home or your storage or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's in the workplace too, right? We
Yep.
want to, and that's often like a New Year's resolution, right?
Yes,
I'm going to get rid
definitely.
of the junk I don't need. I'm going to declutter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's get rid of grease that doesn't work for us.
Yes,
Maybe the
for
grease
sure.
is working against us.
Mm-hmm.
And it really comes down to this kind of fundamental understanding that all greases are not created equal.
Oh
Okay.
my
There's
gosh,
other things
definitely
that
not.
are created equal, and it's
Mm-hmm.
an important consideration. But when it comes to greases, they are not.
No, definitely not. And you need to know which ones actually work because sometimes, especially in these maintenance programs, somebody may have made a switch at the beginning or at some point during the life of the program,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, well, I can't get the red grease, so I'm going to use the blue grease instead, you know. And then we have purple grease,
Yeah.
just mixing up and everything.
Yep.
So things to definitely consider if it's actually working or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I live in a really neat area
Mm-hmm.
in Pennsylvania where we have so many different manufacturers, and I
Right.
think one of the funnest parts of my job, and my coworkers share this too, because we get to go out to some of these places together. It's
Yes.
just to visit,
Yep.
the where the machinery is, and so we made two really neat visits right before the new year started, and one is a place that makes wallpaper.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah, it's a factory just dedicated to making wallpaper, and they've been doing it for over 100 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, and some of the equipment that we got to see is
Over
over a
100
hundred
years.
years old. Yeah, which is quite amazing. Quite
Yeah, that it
quite
still
amazing.
works. Wow.
Yes, yeah, and so you've got, and if you think about it, over that time, that's lubricated machinery.
Yeah.
What is the chance that the lubricant that they had available 100 years
Gosh.
ago is
Yeah.
available today? Well,
Wow.
it simply isn't, right?
No.
So you go through these transitions, but that was one of the things we talked about. They said, hey, there's a certain grease that we've been using, it's
Mm-hmm.
being discontinued. And that
Oh,
happens too.
a lot. It
Hmm.
happens a lot, especially with different regulations coming out in
Hmm.
terms of safety and HSE and all of these things, and us finding out that certain additives or certain materials are hazardous to health. So a lot of things have been pulled off shelves,
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah. And the response is always the same. What's the equivalent?
Yeah.
Right? As if there is you take this
Oh,
one down and
God.
that one slides perfectly in there.
Mm-hmm.
And inevitably, they're not, especially in the scenario
No.
that you just mentioned, where
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain product or a certain chemical that is being eliminated. So, by
Yeah.
its very nature, what's available to replace it is not the same.
No, it will
And
never
so,
be.
yeah, so then we've got to navigate that kind of changing environment. Like, what grease can we use? Will
Yes.
this one work as well as that one? Will they play together nicely in the same container? What are the unique characteristics? So in
Yeah.
that scenario where you know the wallpaper people are like, no, we're not going to get this grease anymore. I thought, you know what? I'll go contact a guy that I've known who's been around for a long time. That he's like a technical sales guy for that
Mhm.
particular brand. So I reached out to
Right.
him, and I found out that not only is the product retired, he's retired too.
Oh no.
So
It
it
happens. It
happens. It
definitely
happens.
happens.
Thankfully for LinkedIn, he was still, checking his LinkedIn, and so I did get
Yes.
to reach him. But his response was kind of what I expected. He said
Hmm.
the replacement depends on the application
Right? Always.
because you've
Hmm.
got a product that can be used in that application and there's something
Yeah.
about it that works here, something about it that works there. But it's not like, this is a pound of sugar and that's a
Yeah.
pound of flour. They have subtle differences. So when
They
you say
do.
it works there, it doesn't necessarily mean that a replacement that works in some applications works in that application.
Hmm.
So it's application specific. And
Always.
the other thing is, you think about it, it's no surprise, I think, that people
Hmm.
sometimes thinks that grease is grease because,
Oh yeah.
what are people told? Grab a grease gun and put 5
Hmm.
shots of grease into that machine.
And hope for the best.
Hope for the best and do it every 3 months because that's what we do. And when you have kind of processes that are independent of the product being used, then you have to assume that the product behaves the same every time. And
Yeah.
that's not the case. And so
No.
in an earlier one of these, we shared that graph that showed like
Yes.
different kinds of grease, right? So you had a very
Hmm.
fundamental, you had a mineral oil base, and you had
Right.
a lithium simple soap, and that had a certain life cycle, and then
Hmm.
if you used, a synthetic base oil, then that
Yeah.
lasted longer and longer and so forth. So this idea that not all greases are created equal comes into play when we switch products, but it also
Right.
goes to questioning, have we chosen the best product for our application?
Hmm.
And there may be other options. We may have chosen the least expensive
Right.
option that works, right? It works, it meets the minimum requirements.
Hmm.
But does that mean that is the most cost effective solution?
Not necessarily, because that downtime is never cost effective.
Yes. And
Never.
even the life of the grease,
Hmm.
if you go back to oils, I
Yep.
think about when I worked in the power plant and we just started to get more opportunities around
Hmm.
synthetic oils.
Yes.
Everything was mineral oil.
Oh yeah.
1980s, everything was pretty much mineral oil out there. And then the industrial lubricant suppliers said, "Hey, we have
Hmm.
a synthetic here, a synthetic there." Now they were more expensive,
Oh yeah.
and so it's like, well, why would if this is working? Why do I need that? Well,
Hmm.
sometimes you would look at that and you would find that, yeah, the current oil works, meets the requirements, and it needs to be changed every 3 months.
Yep.
But if you use a synthetic that has the same or similar properties, it meets the requirements, it has the additives, everything works
Hmm.
well. But instead of for 3 months, it's maybe 12 months.
Yep. Which helps in terms of your labor costs, in terms
Yep.
of somebody going out there to actually add the oil, your purchase costs, because you're not replenishing every four
Right.
times over that same exact period. So,
Correct.
it
It's math.
helps
It's
out
a
with your
math.
budget. Yeah.
It's a math problem, right? You can
Yeah,
do
it
that
is.
math, but oftentimes we don't get to the math problem because
No.
we focus on the price of the
Yeah.
product.
And I
So,
know we have like a couple of questions that were coming in
okay.
while we were talking.
Hmm.
I know Ahmed is actually asking about what is the ideal grease change for those paper manufacturing equipment in
Hmm.
terms of degreasing the sampling frequency. I think
Mm.
that one kind of depends on your equipment that you're sampling
It
in the
does.
paper. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then I know we had Hamza come in very quickly about have you ever come across a document called a grease changeover procedure?
Okay. Um,
And he
yeah, I
would love
have.
to read it. He would love to read it
Okay.
if you have. So, we'll we'll make a note of that for sure, Hamza, and probably send it out to the group if we can.
Yeah, I think what would be nice is if there was a universal grease changeover
Yes.
procedure. And what it turns out in practice, though, it very much depends on the application.
It does.
What are the two greases involved?
Mm-hmm.
What do we understand about their compatibility? What do we understand about how difficult it is to get the old grease out when you're putting
Yeah.
the new grease in? Right? What are
Mm-hmm.
the considerations for product selection? And you know, what areas do you need to address in that transition? Uh,
Yep.
not only in the selection of the grease, but in how you transition, how you clean, how you continue to relubricate, and so forth. It's a great question, and I've been involved in creating kind of custom responses for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be nice to talk a little bit about generically. And you know what I think?
Yeah.
We've asked this so many times, but I think that is the nugget of a
Mm-hmm.
future Grease Thief Goes Live.
Yeah. I
That could be a
definitely
that
think
could be a
so.
whole area of focus, right? What are the areas of concern? Give some examples. Then what should be in such a document, and
Mm-hmm.
walk away with the ability to ask the right questions and develop a solution for that.
Yep.
So let's write that one down, right?
Write that down for sure. And I know Rohit actually had a question as well.
Hmm.
He was asking about if they were using a particular grease type based on the OEM manual,
Hmm.
do they still need to do the relevant calculations or ask the lubricant consultants to verify if it's the correct grease that they have in the machine, since I believe they may be having some problems with it, like it's not lasting as long as it should.
Yeah, yeah. So in general, I would say, if you have specific guidance from an
Right.
OEM says use this product, and you have a history of using it and it's reliable, it doesn't seem to be a
Mm-hmm.
problem, then you can kind of make assumptions that that's fine. But in Rohit's example, if
Right.
you don't have acceptable reliability or issues,
Yes.
then it's time to circle back to that. And the truth of the matter is that an OEM doesn't know all of the variables that go into your deployment of that machine,
Yes.
right? Environmental issues, temperatures, maybe variations in loading or work cycle, contaminants that are present in the environment, maybe how the machine is maintained and how often it's maintained, and what
Mm-hmm.
other products are used in that maintenance. So there's a lot of variables, and they do their best to say, kind of, at the basic level, when this machine's told to move, to circle around, to spin, to move back and forth, that we've seen this grease is one that is effective. But,
Right.
we always want to challenge that. And what they
Yes.
don't necessarily do in that selection is evaluate for you the the benefit potential benefits
Mm-hmm.
of going higher up in the
Right.
quality of the product or the capability of the product. So yeah, I would say I don't ever expect anyone, when they inherit lubrication responsibilities, to have to start and look at every machine in the plant
Yes.
and do a calculation to validate these things, right? But do focus on the ones that are giving you fits, that don't have acceptable
Mm-hmm.
reliability, and circle back and do the calculations or get a consultant that can help to do
Yes.
that evaluation. And sometimes, Rohit, it is the calculation that you're talking about where we look at the speed and
Mm-hmm.
the diameter, the bearing, or the gear pitch, and all these things, and we do the math behind it. But other times that evaluation could be in what we're talking about today, which is sampling and analysis,
Right.
right? Take a sample of that grease after it's been in that application for a period of time, and look, does it have an unexpected high level of wear? If it does, then maybe it's not protecting as a different product might. And if it's got contaminants in there, then you got to question: Am I
Yes.
purging the grease often enough to keep
Mm-hmm.
those contaminants at bay? So there's these kind of things, and I think that's what we want to factor into that decision.
Yeah, I just have one more follow-up question from
Mhm.
Hamza,
Okay.
because he's asking how accurate is grease compatibility studies to the actual grease in operation. Now, I know That's a big one as well.
Yeah.
And he says that, studies involved fresh greases, but not the greases that we have in use, because there's a whole different thing there. Greases in use will have, just as you said, contaminants, different things.
Yeah.
So I will let you answer that one.
Yeah. So I think we've gotten but past the point where the question is, how accurate are the charts? And
Hmm.
we've already talked quite a bit about there's some real shortcomings with
Yeah.
charts that are used because almost across the board, all they're looking at is families of
Hmm.
thickener. They're not looking at anything else about the critical parameters of the grease, and therefore they're woefully inadequate for those reasons. But when it comes to the testing, what Hams is talking about is, yes, there's an ASTM standard. It's ASTM
Hmm.
D6185, and that one is for evaluating the compatibility of binary mixtures of greases, or meaning two different greases mixed
Right.
together. And it's very prescribed, as ASTM standards are, for saying mix greases in these ratios and then perform a number of tests. And then based off the feedback of those tests, we decide whether they're compatible or incompatible. But the challenge, like he says, they're brand new greases used
Yeah.
for that testing. The other challenge is that they're not really worked in a real world application,
Yes.
right? They're just kind of mixed back and forth,
Hmm.
and then the tests that are performed are not dynamic tests.
Yeah.
They are static tests, like the cone penetration and the
Hmm.
dropping point. So there's some definite limitations there, and I think, Hamza, those tests are really just to find the significant or obvious incompatibilities that can exist in the thickener, and that's really
Hmm.
what they're meant for. But if we want to go further, we need to do what he's talking about, which is
Yep.
to put them in a like real world application to
Hmm.
what's being done there. So I'll give you an example. I had a company that makes cranes. So they
Uh-huh.
have articulating cranes, and they have booms that extend out, and those booms are greased. It's like a box within a
Right.
box. And the concern there was about grease mixing. And so,
Mm.
so now it's not like 1800 RPM bearings spinning around compatibility.
Hmm.
It's small, slow oscillation back and forth that allows that that's the scenario that you want to test again. And what happens
Right.
when that mixture takes place? So yeah, you do need to get better from a testing perspective. You do need the testing to more closely represent the field conditions, and in some cases, when there is a known degradation or a known
Yes.
contaminant that grease is dealing with. Let's say it's a wet environment and you've chosen a
Hmm.
grease that has good water washout, and because it's going to be dealing with a 0.5% of water most of the time,
Yeah.
and you might want to evaluate the mixture with the presence of the contaminant and in a worked environment that more closely simulates what you're going to ask that grease to do. And so all that I've talked about is not present in that current ASTM standard,
Yeah.
but it is in the working group that's
Hmm.
now evaluating that standard for changes to make it better reflective of real world conditions.
And that's the beauty of actually revising these standards,
Hmm.
bringing it up to speed with what we actually have going on in the industry, and that makes sense in some way.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I like the way that he asked that allows
Hmm.
us to kind of delve into the reasons behind why we need to challenge that standard, and
Yeah.
we certainly need to challenge these charts,
Charts.
and maybe even and when it's not a chart, I'll tell you the second most common way that people make compatibility decisions is asking the new supplier for a
Ah,
letter,
yes. Mm-hmm.
the infamous compatibility letter,
Yes.
and which I guarantee will not hold up in a court of law. There's actually been some cases where after equipment failure that was part
Right.
of lawsuits and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it goes beyond. It's just one person's opinion or
Yeah.
one, and like I always say, if you have a letter that says they're compatible, look for the data. You need
Yeah.
data. You need data to back up those decisions. So, good question. Really good question.
Yes.
That's another one that I think we could get
Yes, that
into,
we could definitely jump
Yeah.
into for
And,
sure.
and and just a whole, a whole presentation about that
Hmm.
compatibility standard and what's proposed to change with it, because I think that would build support for it. And certainly an effort like that needs a lot of, you know, interested parties to
Yes, it
support
does.
the effort to make those changes. It takes
Hmm.
time and it takes that effort. So, yeah, great stuff. Great questions coming in here. I want to finish
Yeah.
this one
Oh, yes.
idea, that maybe the higher price greases end up leading to a lower cost of operation. We got to be open minded to that. And
Hmm.
if the grease we are using now doesn't work for us because maybe it's a higher temperature application, higher speed, maybe it's greater load, all these things we really should consider better grease solutions and fire the grease. It
Yes.
doesn't work for us, right? Yeah. But we can unclutter our grease supply. We
Hmm.
can reduce redundant products, right? We can consolidate.
Right.
Did
And
talk about the,
consolidation.
the danger of over consolidation.
Yes.
I was in a plant one time and I talked about consolidation. They said we already consolidated. I said, oh, how did that work out? He said, well, we had
Oh,
a
good.
manager that said, I'm sick of all these greases. Just find me one grease that works for everything.
What?
Yes, and they had consolidated to one
Oh
grease.
boy.
I said, that's a great approach if all your machines have
All the
exactly
same.
the same requirements, but
And
you
that's
actually
never
have
true.
different machines. So yeah, and we want to get the wrong greases out of there, and
Yes.
so that's going to come through analysis. It's not just hunch. It's not I don't like the color blue or the color
Hmm.
red. It's going to have to be based off of data, and that's where grease analysis can help.
Definitely.
And then, it's not easy to upgrade your grease because you
Yep.
get pushback. Why do I need
Hmm.
that product when there's another product over here that has a lower price? Well, the answer is you cost justify it by
Right.
getting the higher quality and some of these synthetic greases where needed by calculating what are the annual costs of operation.
Hmm.
When someone says, I'm not buying that product because I've got a
Yeah.
cheaper product over here, you say you're using the wrong parameter because
Hmm.
that's not what this company pays. This company pays the total costs of
Hmm.
operating the grease
Yeah.
lubricated equipment, and that's only one small piece of it. So drive that decision. Don't be content just to hear that it's a price difference. It
Hmm.
needs to be the cost difference, the cost of operation. And then we can get towards uncluttering things, getting rid of
Yes.
greases that are working against us. Yeah. And there's two more things that I wanted to fit into this today. And one is about clean greases, right? We want to
Yes.
clean
Always.
house. New Year's here. Let's
New
clean
things.
house.
Hmm.
And I know this first statement is understood as being universal, right? Dirt
Should be.
reduces lubricant life. Dirt reduces machine life. I think people understand that. And,
Hmm.
and when they hear that statement, they're thinking oil, right?
Hmm.
Because dirty and wet oils, they can be visibly evident. You got cloudy
Right.
oil. You pour your can out and you look at the bottom and you see a ring in the bottom. And
Yes.
you're like, oh goodness
Oh
gracious,
no.
we have dirty oil, right? And and for the most part, we can easily filter those things. There's
Hmm.
filtering solutions, and that's something that a lot of folks do. It's measurable. It you can do return on investment there, and things really get better when you filter the oils.
Yeah.
When you get around the
You can do that for
greases,
graces.
it's
No.
a mystery, right? It's a mystery because no one knows. No one knows their grease cleanliness until they measure.
Yeah.
So if you aren't sampling and analyzing greases, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't know if your performance is the best that you can get, or it's at 70% because 30% is being
Dirt.
destroyed by dirt and water. And
Hmm.
so if anything, I want to join us today or watch this on the replay or something, get a chance to see this. Now this was some grease that when you held it in your hand looked fine because it was bright blue. It looked
Oh.
pretty, right? It's you hold it up to light, you can't see through it.
Hmm.
It's bright blue. It looks fine to me. I'm going to slather it on my machine. but this was one of the first ones that we put into the new device that we had, which is the
Wow.
grease particle counter.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, why didn't that work? Let's go
Oh.
back here. I've got to go back and try this again. All right, I need to start here.
Yeah.
And when you do the die extrusion, and this is
Mm-hmm.
ASTM D7918, when you do the die extrusion, you make a thin film of the grease. And then the
Oh.
light is shining through it. And all we see here
Oh my
is
God.
terrible, terrible. Now,
Wow.
you, you see some little circles that look like donuts flying by.
Yes.
They're just little air bubbles. They're air bubbles. So that's not a problem. But these dark pieces of various sizes, bigger chunks, these are dirt particles. These are
Wow.
hard abrasives that are getting in there and doing damage. And it's
Yes.
quite astonishing how dirty some of the very new, still in the packaging greases are.
Oh,
And
wow.
unless we see this, so
Mhm.
if I'm trusting if I'm spending money on expensive
Right.
equipment, the very least I want to see this picture for the greases I'm using, and I want to see how clean it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to buy the grease. I want to stock the grease. I want to protect the grease that doesn't have all these particles in it, and
Yeah.
it's doable. It's really doable. So, but you don't know you have a problem
Until you actually check.
Yep, yep. So let's resolve this year to clean out our grease.
Yes, definitely.
Commit to sampling the new grease supply. And we had a kit for this. And that kit
Mm-hmm.
gave you 8 different sampling sleeves so that you could go into your lube oil, your lubricant supply area, and you could grab grease guns and say, okay, I'm just going to put the end of the grease gun right into the kit tube here. I'm going to pump it right into a grease thief, and I'm going to send it back. And what I'm going to get is this picture or this video, and I'm going to see whether the grease I have that I'm pumping into the machines is clean or it's not. And you can do that with the grease guns. If you have auto lubers, you can dip right into the auto luber reservoir because that's the ready supply that you're introducing to the machines. Know whether your machines need protection from that
Yes.
or not. And so to do that, just find a lab that offers ASTM D7918. And that's
Mhm.
that has the test for the PC, the particle count.
Yep.
And we're going to talk in a minute about the trip I'm making, right, to Dubai. There is going to
Mhm.
be a second lab in Dubai
Yes.
at the same time that has this capability a little closer to that part of the world. And that's the
Mhm.
folks at ECOL.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our friends in Poland. So they're going to be there as well. And there's various ones around the world. So
Mhm.
there's capabilities out there. And if you want to protect your equipment, you got to find them. You got to
Yep.
find them. You got to get one of these kits. You got to say, where do I stand? Do I have a problem or don't I? So once I know, I want to fire the dirty grease fires. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Hire clean greases. And, sometimes we'll look at this. The grease gun's dirty. Grease gun's dirty. Well, what are we going to do next? Well, let's check the tubes.
Yeah.
Check the new stuff. And if that's
Everything.
clean, guess where the problem is? Not with the supply.
boy. It's how
It's
we're
in my
getting
own
the
house,
stuff.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's in the house. The killer is in the house. Back to our
Oh my
Halloween.
God.
right?
Oh, Halloween edition. Sure.
Yeah, going back to our Halloween edition. Yeah, the killer is in the house. No, we don't measure. We don't know. And that's what
Yeah.
we have to do if we're going to clean things out. And we want to get a good report card, right? Use
Yes.
grease analysis, assess your weak areas, assess the strengths. That's part of what the clean
Mm-hmm.
grease checkup is.
Yep.
Clean your greases, reduce wear, stop the mixing, get early detection, know the causes, and that cycle to correction of the failure cycle is that much sooner. When we know the data, we know where to attack it.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah. And then we got to share it. We got to show
Yes.
people what is all this stuff doing. I mean, Ron Jansen, who works with us here, he and I just came back this morning from a major manufacturer in our region, and we're setting up a clean lube room for that company.
Ah, nice.
We're doing like the containers for the oils. We've got the storage for the greases, all of that. And, one of the first things is there something to buy. Man, why are they spending all that money on that?
Yes.
Well, if you didn't think you had a problem, it may look like, do I really need to spend all that?
Mm-hmm.
That's, all that investment. Get the data. Show
Yeah.
them we're spending this money because our oil looks like that. Our grease looks like that.
And this
Um,
is what it costs us in production downtime. Like
right.
that is the major factor, and that's the big dollar sign at the end of the day that they really need to look at. Because
For
if it's
sure.
affecting your production, it's affecting your operations. Nobody wants that.
No. And, no one knows if they're doing a good job or not
Yes.
until they measure it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how much better can we be doing? Are we peak performance,
Mm.
or do we have a little room to grow, or do we have a
Yeah.
lot of room to grow? Yeah, how easy is it going to be? We got to measure it. We got to know how close we are to that goal we have and how much room there is. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it, how does it scatter? Are we in the green? Do we have low wear concentrations, or do we have clusters of equipment that has high wear? Or if we look at
Right.
the consistency, is everything staying in the green, or is
Mm-hmm.
grease getting too soft? Is it
Right.
or is it hardening and drying out?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? And then we can target the wrong grease. Then we can cost justify the higher quality or synthetic greases, or doing the cost of getting the cleaner greases, or keeping our rooms clean and so forth.
Yes.
So it gets us where we need to go.
It
So
definitely
the
does.
last thing I want to get in here is making travel plans, and that's
Yeah.
sometimes a New Year's resolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do something I've never done before. Well, Sonia, I'm doing something I've never done
Yes.
before.
Very
I,
nice.
I'm going to the Middle East. Yep. And it took, I mean, a lot of this credit goes to
Mm-hmm.
Hamza.
Oh
Yep.
yes, Hamza, thank you so much.
Yep. He,
Starting the revolution on the side for sure.
yep. He got the bearing rolling, so to speak.
Hmm.
And,
And you
you
had the
know,
right grease for it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, first I said, well, let's start just communicating to people.
Hmm.
Let's see how wide the issue is, how wide the interest may be,
Right.
and we've grown this over time, and to the point where here's this opportunity. And so I think those folks that join us, especially if they're in that part of the world, if there's any
Hmm.
chance, we've got a little less than a month now
Hmm.
to get this lined up. But there it is in Dubai, and I will be there. My friends from Ecole will be
Hmm.
there as well. Our friend Alan Reenstra
Yay, Alan.
from Ultrasonic Racing, he's going to be there as well. And I'm going to meet a whole bunch of new friends
Hmm.
over there. Some that I've never met in person, but I'm really looking forward to that. And
Definitely.
I'll have the tools there. People will be able to put hands on, see and feel and touch what they've been hearing about, and really get a sense of how to take this forward. So it's coming next. In fact, the next Grease Thief Live comes from Dubai.
July. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to get over there, and I'll have to figure out the logistics, and
Yeah.
find a place to do that and so forth. But we'll get that set up sometime during the week of the 17th, and
Definitely.
and I'll broadcast back to the rest of the world from Dubai. Maybe
Hmm.
even have maybe even have some people join me in person.
Yes, that would be
Yeah,
great.
yeah, that would be fantastic. So that's next, and what are the next travel plans? Well, if you're not going to be in Dubai, maybe you'll be in Detroit,
Yeah.
because we're working that one out, right?
Oh, yeah. I will be there for sure. So I will see you there.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Oh my gosh. So this one is like so big. I love it. I went last year and it was so engaging, so much great energy, so many people coming in. And I had such a good time. I got to meet up with a lot of people. Greg Livingstone is going to be there again this year. Of course, huge shout out to the team at Lube Expo North America who just, I know they do a lot of planning and a lot of stuff in advance. So they're going to be bringing a very high quality program, 3 full days, speakers from around the world, very high quality sessions, and it's just such a good energy and such a good vibe. Maybe a little bit cold, But
Yeah.
it's gonna be a really good time, and we have some very interesting things planned for that week in March.
Yeah.
So bring your jackets and your coats and meet us in Detroit.
Well, you had to bring up cold today. I got in after I had already been in a meeting this morning. I got back into my truck. It was -7 degrees
Oh my
Fahrenheit.
God. No.
So yeah, this is cold.
My Caribbean blood can't take all of that.
No, no. It'll be warmer in March. Don't worry. You'll have to bring a jacket, but you'll be
I
fine.
will bring a lot of clothes.
Well, the one after that, then I'm going to be
Mhm.
back in Europe again. So
Right.
going to be there for the European Lubricating Grease Institute
Nice.
over in Copenhagen. Got a lot of friends over in Copenhagen. I'm looking
Great.
forward to that. Going to be doing a presentation there, and then be back in the States again in Chicago for
All
Reliable
right.
Plant. Yeah,
Good. Good.
yep. So
Perfect.
we got a number of them planned out there, and I think I don't know if you saw this message as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think for the Lubricant Expo, there was maybe some discussion about holding a workshop
Yeah,
for
I
food,
saw something about
yeah,
that.
yeah, for food processing.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be
Look
an
out for
opportunity
it.
for that to do and that goes to ICML,
Mm-hmm.
the certification for food processing lubrication. So a lot going on.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot of opportunities to meet up. We know that not everybody can get on the road and go to these places, and that's why we do
Mm-hmm.
this podcast.
Definitely.
So everybody can participate. But sometimes there's not a substitute for seeing it in person, especially when it's new technology
Oh
and
yeah.
you just want to have that interaction that we can
Mm-hmm.
have in person. So definitely looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Sometimes no substitute for in person for sure. But I know Rich Ahmed actually had a quick question,
Hmm.
and he was asking if it was possible to use a 000 grease instead of a very heavy gear oil like a ISO VG680. But I think that definitely depends on your application and your operating temperatures and those sort of things.
It does.
But
It does. And I can think of a specific application that
uh-huh.
may kind of illustrate this a little bit. I was working at a steel mill in Pennsylvania.
Mm.
We still have some here, I actually had people from two different plants in a
Wow.
class, and someone said, what would cause the paint to burn off of a
Mm.
gearbox was the question.
It's
And
not my question.
yeah, I said burn off. They said, yeah, it just smokes and burns away. I'm like, holy cow. I said, well, what's the application and so on? And they said, oh, it's this gearbox. And someone else in the class said, well, I have that gearbox. And
Mm.
they said, I don't have that problem. And I said, well, what oil are you using? That guy said, well, I'm using a 220 oil. The other guy
Mhm.
said, I'm using a 460 oil. I said,
Oh,
well, right there, you've got an issue. I said, gearboxes generate a lot of heat.
yep,
And,
it does.
and I said, well, why are you using different oils? And the guy said,
Mhm.
we tried using the 220 oil, but it leaked out. So we use a higher
Ah.
viscosity. And so when
Mhm.
I thought about that, and this is what I shared with them at the time, I said, your viscosity needs to be selected based off of the gear geometry, the speed,
Mhm.
and the requirements for that. If you have leakage, you can't fix it just by going up in viscosity because now you're creating a higher temperature situation. But
Yes.
if you do use a small amount of thickener, as in a triple aught grease, that may be the solution, and that's the direction they headed. So, in answer to that question, it was Ahmed that asked that, right?
Yes, it was Ahmed.
Yeah. Yes, you can. And one place where that's commonly done is in robotics. So
Mm,
there
yeah.
are a lot of robotics gear applications that use triple aught or double aught
Right.
greases. And the idea is there is just to help keep them from leaking out. Once
Mhm.
you once you have that thickener from the grease, now you can have the appropriate viscosity for the
Yes.
oil to create that lubricating film. Because remember, in gear applications, the purpose of the lubricant, whether it's an oil or a grease,
Yep.
is to generate a combination of hydrodynamic and elastohydrodynamic films between those surfaces and to deliver in some cases an additive. It could be an EP
Yes.
additive or something like that. But we don't play around with viscosity to try to
No.
prevent leaks. And sometimes a triple up grease might be that solution.
And I just have one more quick question from
Sure.
Hamza.
Okay.
And he's asking, is it safe to consider all typical polyurea greases for electric motors? Are they all compatible? So is it that it's similar to where you have synthetic turbine oils
Hmm.
for GE or solar?
Hmm.
I know with the electric motors, a lot of people use the polyurea,
Hmm.
but he's asking if it's going to be like compatible across the board with all of the different polyurea.
Right. And the answer is not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I've had this happen. I've had a plant that was asking that question. They were
Right.
consolidating. They were using two different polyureas. In that
Um,
case, those two specific polyureas that we tested in the test stand, like I've described, we
mm-hmm.
worked it together in the bearing and so forth, and then looked at its dynamic behavior changes. They failed that test. And the way to think about that is that polyurea doesn't describe the chemistry of
Mm-hmm.
that grease. It merely describes the family
Yeah.
of chemicals that can be used as a thickener. So you can have very different products that get categorized as polyurea,
Yes.
and they don't have chemical or physical compatibility. They behave differently, and you get these problems that we see. So the answer is that it's possible that they're
Mm-hmm.
compatible, but it's possible that they're not compatible, and only testing can really answer that question.
Yes. Always, when in doubt, test it and get the data because I think that's the main thing. You
Yeah.
need to have data, don't make the assumptions.
The only exception that I would make to that is if you had two greases from the
Mm-hmm.
same
Ah,
manufacturer
yes.
and they had two different products, but they were both thickened with a
Mm-hmm.
polyurea grease. You could check with that manufacturer to say, are they the
Yes.
same product? And in that case, you're not worrying about the thickener compatibility. But other
Yeah.
than that, testing it really still is required. And this really uncovers the fallibility of these charts
Mm-hmm.
because every chart will say, it'll even say that every lithium compatible
Would be, yeah.
lithium complex
Mm-hmm.
is compatible with every lithium
It's not
complex.
true.
Not true because they're actually could be quite different chemistry wise. So that applies to polyureas. The answer is it's possible, but it's
Mm-hmm.
possible they are not, and we only know by testing.
Right, definitely. And I know just Linda Perry says she's gonna be in Detroit too, so we'll see you there,
Oh,
Linda. I'm
super.
very excited. I
It's
know
been a
Anna.
while since I've
Yes.
seen her in person, and I'm really looking forward to that. Linda and I have kept in touch,
Nice.
and yeah, that'll be exciting, Linda. Looking forward to that.
Good. And I know Anna Goodman is telling us, safe travels, you know, be safe out there. So thanks for that, Anna. We
Yes.
hope we could meet you at one of the different sessions,
Mhm.
make some travel plans. Um, and just, everybody else who joined us. I know we had a little bit of a late start, but I want to make sure that, we got all of our questions
Yeah.
in. We were able to, address some of the things that you all have concerns about. And of course, always feel free to like message us because that's what it's about, just making sure that we bring the awareness and we bring the knowledge to you because you all need to use it. And we need to make our assets feel appreciated this year. And let's not have some unplanned downtime due to grease failure. Let's not be wasting grease or wasting time and finding the right grease for you. All of those important, very important things that we covered today.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
Well,
make some
thank you.
travel plans,
Thank you, Sonia.
You're most welcome. I'm
Yep,
so glad. And next time we will be seeing you from Dubai.
from Dubai.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. See you
All
then.
right. See you then. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yep. Bye now.
Bye.